Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue with our journey, our discussions, our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2021. And that brings us to a work which has been designated at spine number 1080. And this is from the year 2016, and it is from the filmmakers Martin Bell and Mary Ellen Mark. And it is this work, which is Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell. Once again, let me address the point about the release made by the Criterion Collection of these two works in this single disc release. Those two works being Streetwise and Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell. And what we have done is we have divided up the discussion of each of these works into two separate videos. An earlier video was one where we talked about Streetwise, and now today I would like to focus our attention, if I may, on the work from 2016, which is Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell, and also the supplements that are associated with such part of this release. Because as we know, when you put the disc into the machine, into the player, it brings us to the general menu, and from there we can select one of the films, either Streetwise or Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell. And when we select the film, then we go into that particular film's sub-menu, and from there we can choose the film, chapters, or the supplements, or in the case of Streetwise, that commentary track for that film. But for Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell, it has its own separate section and its own separate supplements. However, I should say, as we will discuss throughout the course of this video, those supplements found with the portion of the disc devoted to Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell, have very strong direct connections with the earlier work, Streetwise. And so I would like to try to address some of those as we talk about this work from 2016, which is Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell. Now, it is described as being a film produced by Mary Ellen Mark and Martin Bell, and directed by Martin Bell. And when one is reminded of those facts, and when one watches the film, Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell, one realizes, or I realized, that this is a work that is about the lives of many people. First of all, it is a work that is focusing in on the life of ERIN Blackwell, ERIN, who was also known as Tiny, and who was also one of the people that we were introduced to in the earlier work, Streetwise, when she was at the time 14 years old. And now we have a film that is many years after the fact, Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell. And also along the way, as we watch Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell, we also are reminded of the fact that there were a number of short films that were also made. One called Tiny at 20 from 1993, and the other called ERIN at 2005. And then Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell, which was released in 2016. And so we have these various points in time, the early 1980s, and then the early 1990s, and then the early 2000s, and then the early 2010s. And so these form the marks, if you will, the points in time at which we have visit, or we get to know, or we become reacquainted with the life of Tiny, the life of ERIN Blackwell, starting with Streetwise, then going into these short films, and then leading up to this feature-length work, Tiny, the life of ERIN Blackwell. And so in that way, this film is about the life of ERIN and what it is that she has gone through and what it is that she is going through right now with her particular life circumstances involving herself and also her family. And we also realize that she is a mother. And by the time we get to Tiny, the life of ERIN Blackwell, we understand that she is a mother of 10 children. And each of these children are people, are individuals, are human beings that we get to know as well as we are experiencing the particular lives of these individuals through this extraordinary work, Tiny, the life of ERIN Blackwell. So that's one level, I think, that this film is engaging with the lives of certain people, certain human beings. Another way, of course, is also the filmmakers themselves, Martin Bell and Mary Ellen Mark, because we understand, too, that Mary Ellen Mark passed away in the year 2015. And so we understand that this film was released after her passing, and it was completed after her passing. She appears, Mary Ellen Mark does, appears in some parts of this film, Tiny, the life of ERIN Blackwell. She appears early on, in fact, and we hear her voice and we see her interactions sitting next to ERIN or talking to Martin Bell off camera or off screen about whether the camera is on or not, etc. And looking, we see her, Mary Ellen Mark, looking at her own photographs and talking to ERIN and others about the photographs and looking back on the various short films that were made, or looking back on Streetwise and then the subsequent short films that were made that focused in on ERIN's life, those being, as I mentioned, Tiny at 20 and ERIN. And not only do we see Mary Ellen Mark engaging with, say, ERIN, who is looking back on these past works, she's also talking with or engaging with her children and seeing how they are reacting as they watch the past works as well. And so we get this very fascinating cross-section of, or the interweaving of the lives of these individuals, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. And sometimes the people, such as Mary Ellen Mark, who were behind the camera, are now in front of the camera. And also we realize that they have this relationship that is very much reflected in the way and the tone and the demeanor and the manner in which they are talking with each other, Mary Ellen Mark and ERIN Blackwell. And also just in the way that they are engaging with us, the viewers, and sharing with us a little bit, or a lot indeed, about themselves and what it is, where they find themselves at their particular lives, or at this particular point in time that this film is being made. And also they are looking back on their lives, on their work, on their experiences, and seeing how those experiences have led up to where they find themselves right now. And so in these ways, I think we have a very multi-dimensional work that is, in many senses, a type of celebration. It's also a type of culmination. It's also, of course, a reminder and also a revisitation of the lives of these individuals, these people, at the center of which is this woman who is also a mother and who is also working very hard and trying to deal with these difficult situations that she is now facing, both in terms of herself and relationships, but also those situations of her children as well. And so in that way, it is a further continuation of this life story, or the coverage, if you will, or the way in which ERIN is willing to share with us with Mary Ellen Mark, with Martin Bell, and with us, parts of her life and the lives of her family members, those who mean very much to her, and a little bit about those circumstances growing up and raising her children, or perhaps in some instances, in her own words, not being able to raise some of her children due to the circumstances of her own life at the time that they were born, her age, having to confront issues about foster care for her children, or the state authorities taking custody away from her due to certain circumstances, etc., which we find out was the case, or was part of the points that were being covered in the earlier short work from the 1990s called Tiny at 20. And so for these, I think, and other examples, I think we have a very powerful work, Tiny, The Life of ERIN Blackwell, that is, as I was trying to suggest earlier, many things at once, and it's dealing with many lives at once. And it is also a continuation and a companion piece to Streetwise, as well as the earlier works, as well as being a revisitation and celebration of the legacy of Mary Ellen Mark, as well as a type of discussion and intimate portrait of ERIN Blackwell and her family. In that way, I think this work can be approached in a number of different aspects. One of the key aspects of this work is how the film or the work is treating the earlier materials, Streetwise, and then the short films, Tiny at 20 and ERIN. Those films, as I say, came earlier. And so if one is thinking about a sequence to watch the works, perhaps one sequence would be to watch Streetwise, and then Tiny at 20, the short work, and then ERIN, the other short work, and then Tiny, The Life of ERIN Blackwell, the feature-length work here. Because when we watch Tiny, The Life of ERIN Blackwell, as I was indicating earlier, one of the aspects is seeing how these individuals, like ERIN, but also like some of her children, like Shawnee or like Dalen, for instance, how they are also seen in the film looking at, in particular, a tablet device or screen, and they're watching. We see them watching the footage or the interview excerpts or the scenes in which they appeared, for instance, as young children in Tiny at 20, or we see them interact with, or we see them watch their own interviews as we saw them approximately 10 years later in the short work ERIN, or they're watching their mother being interviewed and talking about the challenges in terms of her trying to be a parent to these children at her particular point in time, and how old she was at the time, etc. And we see them almost in real time as they're watching these past works and their interviews, interacting with it, talking to the screen, almost being critical at some points, because they are, after all, looking at it from their own perspectives as well. And this also leads us to another way in which this film Tiny is really quite fascinating, because it also shows us the generational relationships between the lives of, say, ERIN and also Will, and also the lives of their children. And of course we meet their children, and some in particular become central focus points of this particular work, such as I mentioned, Dalen or Shawnee, or also Micah, or Reneja, Rayshawn, etc. We also meet some of the other younger children like Julian, etc. But we also get the circumstances or some episodes or parts of the life stories of these children, and who are at different stages of their own lives. Some of them are young, some of them are a little bit older, but in any event, each is in his or her own specific circumstance. And sometimes some of those circumstances that we become aware of as we watch the film, some of them are quite delicate or quite sensitive or quite tough and harsh and cruel indeed. And in fact, we do see also how these children are having to deal with very difficult circumstances that in many ways echo the types of circumstances that we saw confronting the youths, the young children, the teenagers that we saw at the very outset in this cycle of works, in the work Streetwise, included in which, of course, is ERIN Blackwell herself, Tiny. And so we see this generational connection, parents and children, that we also saw echoed very powerfully in that earlier work, Streetwise, in terms of certain relationships that we saw being portrayed between parents and children, mothers and daughters, for instance, ERIN and her mother too. And we also see that relationship, or those generational relationships, parent-child relationships, explored or examined or captured in the subsequent works as well, the Tiny at 20 and then also ERIN. In particular, we see how ERIN is viewing her own role as a mother, as well as viewing her role in the relationship with her own mother. And that is also carried through in this film, Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell. And we also see that generational dynamic in terms of Will and how he is shown in terms of his figure or his position as a type of father figure, especially in how how some of the footage or some of the excerpts of the earlier short work ERIN from the early to mid-2000s, how we see his role in this particular family dynamic play itself out, and also what happens to him, or what the circumstances are that are related to him, and how the children and how the family and how ERIN relate to him by the time we get to several years later to Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell. So in these and other ways, we have a fascinating turn, and it's again, another honest and raw capturing of the lives of these particular human beings and individuals at this point in time. So we are reminded of where, for instance, ERIN was when we first met her in Streetwise, and we are then reminded of where she was when we meet her again in Tiny at 20, and then we are reminded again of where she was when we met her again in ERIN, and then we see her again, we meet her again in Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell, and now she is also looking forward but also looking back, and we see and we hear from her reactions about her life, looking back on her life, and those are very powerful moments indeed. And we also realize this powerful thing about the passage of time and one's life, and all the things that happen in one's life. And when we are reminded in particular of all the things that happen in ERIN Blackwell's life, it is astounding and challenging and shocking and so thought-provoking, and that we see her confronting those issues now in these times, at the time of Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell, and how strongly resonant they are with the events of her life that we saw as shown throughout this cycle of extraordinary works, beginning with Streetwise and then going from Tiny 20 and then ERIN and then now Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell. It is a very powerful work indeed, and we see a lot of raw emotion, we see a lot of vulnerability, we see heartache, and we see tragedy, potential tragedy. We also see a type of resolve, we also see a type of strength, we also get a sense of a youthful innocence in these children, and especially the young ones, And it reminds us of that youthful innocence that we saw expressed in a number of the scenes at the very start with Streetwise. Here there is this haunting echo, past and present, linked in this way. And also we get a sense too about the lives of these people, and we get a sense of what the circumstances are and their situations are in the moment. We're not sure what will happen to them in the future, but we hope for them, and we are of course with them because they have been so generous to share with us their lives and their vulnerabilities and their frailties and the way in which they are dealing in the way that they see, the best way that they can, given the circumstances they are facing, how they are dealing with these circumstances. And one can say they are dealing with it in an honest way, in a way that is also filled with a sense of dignity and nobility in the face of extreme hardship and turmoil, and indeed quite challenging situations indeed. So this is another very complex, a very unforgettable, and another very moving portrait. And I should conclude also with the point that this film also is a celebration of the life and legacy of Mary Ellen Mark, who did pass away in 2015. And so we understand too that she and Martin Bell had this very strong personal and professional relationship, and their film and photograph art legacy is very much represented in this body of work, Streetwise and Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell, and also in a number of the short films that we have included here, and I'll get to those momentarily, included in which of course are Tiny at 20 and ERIN, which are very much interconnected with Streetwise and Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell. And so here we have shots of, as I say, Mary Ellen Mark looking at her photographs, talking about her photographs, talking about those moments, talking about those personal, intimate moments with ERIN. There's a little bit of a discussion at the very outset about Rat and how she might have felt about Rat. What is love? How could what it meant to have feelings of love, if those could in fact be understood and comprehended at the time, and her life, etc. And so these are indications or examples of that warmth and friendship and intimacy that was had with Mary Ellen Mark. And so this is a film about Tiny. This is also a film about Mary Ellen Mark. And in fact, I'm reminded of how the film begins. It says it has a dedication to M.E., and M.E. is in capital letters. And one can read that. In fact, I first read that to mean dedicated to me. However, upon closer examination, I realized that it wouldn't mean me, M.E., but in fact it means M.E. as in Mary Ellen. So this film is dedicated to the memory of Mary Ellen Mark. And so in that way, this is a celebration of the life and legacy of Mary Ellen Mark, and also a celebration as well as a return and a portrait, an intimate portrait of the life and the family of ERIN Blackwell. And so this is, in those ways, an extraordinary work. This is Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell. So now let us turn to the Criterion Collection release. Now, as I indicated earlier, this is a single disc release, but it has the two films, Streetwise and Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell, the latter being at spine number 1080. Now, Tiny, the Life of ERIN Blackwell also has with it a number of supplements that are very interesting and key indeed. And I've referred to a number of them already. Now, the first grouping of such supplement section is called Streetwise Revisited. And when you go into that submenu and select that, you are taken to a number of possible short films. So the first is Tiny at 20 in 1993, approximately 13 minutes. The second is ERIN, 2005, approximately 23 minutes. And the third is Streetwise Revisited Rat. This is from 2021, approximately 14 minutes. So the first two of these are the films that I was speaking of earlier, Tiny at 20 and ERIN, because as we know, these films are directly relevant to the work Tiny, the life of ERIN Blackwell, because they are featured directly in that work, and we see, as I say, people actually watching the footage, ERIN watching the footage of Tiny at 20 or Streetwise, etc. So to have the short films themselves here is very, very crucial. And indeed, as I was suggesting earlier, perhaps it is a good idea to go in a type of order. Streetwise, then Tiny at 20, then ERIN, and then Tiny, the life of ERIN Blackwell. And that's not all, because we also have the work which is Streetwise Revisited, Rat. Rat refers to that individual, that young boy that we first met in the work Streetwise, Rat. In fact, it is shots of him that open that particular work. And so now we have the opportunity to meet Rat once again. Now he is grown up many years after the fact. And so when we watch this film, we realize, or we get reacquainted with him, and we understand a little bit about what happened to him after we last saw him in the film Streetwise. And we are reminded too of how the film Streetwise and how his story, as it was depicted in Streetwise, ended. It ended in a very dramatic way in terms of his relationship, Rat's relationship with Tiny, as one recalls. And so that is one of the aspects that is explored or revisited when we get to this this update film, as it were, this short film, approximately 14 minutes, and that is Streetwise Revisited, Rat. Also, we get a sense of, as I suggested earlier, there is this revelation of information and detail as to Rat's life after the fact. And so there are many surprises. There are so many, one should watch it if you have seen these other works, because it is, as I say, another indication or another continuation of that particular story, and a type of conclusion as well from a certain point of view or certain points of view. So this is highly, highly recommended. So please check it out if you can, this short film. But that's not all, because we also have another short film from 1995. It's called The Amazing Plastic Lady. And this is focusing in on a particular or specific troupe of circus performers in India. And this is around the early 1990s. And it's also related to the photography work of Mary Ellen Mark, very much like Streetwise was related to her photography work with Life magazine. Here we have a continuation or a different photography project that led to this particular film or short film. And it's a fascinating work. We get to meet a number of the performers. We get to meet we get a sense of the philosophy involved in the circus performance arena. And there's certain of the performance children that we meet, in particular a young girl named Pinky. And we see images or shots or moments that are captured about her training, and also we get a glimpse into her family life and her mother, and we get some perspective from her and what it means to her to have her daughter be away from home and be this performer in this special way. And also we get some indications as to these children, what their hopes and dreams are and what it is they are going through in order to to achieve that. In that discussion too, there is this notion of education, of the role of a type of discipline in education, also the role of religion, and also the role of class as well. And this is therefore themes or concerns that are echoing the types of themes and concerns that we of course saw in the earlier works, or the other works that are found in the set, so Streetwise and Tiny: The Life of ERIN Blackwell, as well as Tiny at 20, and Streetwise Revisited Rat, and also ERIN. And so this is again a great type of continuation of those themes, as well as looking at it again in a different part of the world, but also realizing too the universality of these themes, as well as the way in which these filmmakers, Martin Bell and Mary Ellen Mark, are really giving us their very careful and considerate eye to these individuals as they are engaging with them. So another fascinating short work, The Amazing Plastic Lady. So please check it out if you can. And then the supplements are concluded with a trailer for Tiny: The Life of ERIN Blackwell. So please check that out as well. It is a very interesting trailer. And so that is the supplement section for Tiny: The Life of ERIN Blackwell. So the short films and the trailer. These short films are splendid, really splendid, and they form great companion pieces to these two feature-length works, as well as being themselves, each individually in its own way, a remarkable work of art. So please check those out if you can, as well as checking out the feature-length films Streetwise and Tiny: The Life of ERIN Blackwell. And I should say too that before we go, I do want to mention again the booklet. It is a staple booklet, which is remarkable. I love the staple booklet format, and so that means you get a number of pictures as well as a number of writings, and we do have a great amount. I mentioned it in the previous video, but there are 3 writings. First is the essay by Andrew Hedden called Qualities of Life, and this is an essay that covers Streetwise, and also Tiny: The Life of ERIN Blackwell. And so I think it's a nice, comprehensive, well-written essay, and so when you've seen both works, then it might be a good idea to watch the works first and then read the great essay, because it is so well worth it, as well as you get some more fantastic photographs. And then, speaking of photographs, we, as I mentioned earlier, we get the reproduction of the Life magazine 1983 article and photographs, Streets of the Lost, which again was one of the foundational inspiration points that led to the film Streetwise. And then we have a really moving writing from 2015 called Reflections on Tiny, 2015, by Mary Ellen Mark. And this is, again, from her own words, her perspective on the relationship between her and ERIN. And so, and also it's very poignant too, because it was very much close to the point in time of her own passing. And so we come to realize when we read these writings about how very close she was to the people that were that formed the heart and soul of these documentaries. And so we get this close connection, again, Mary Ellen Mark and ERIN Blackwell. And so this is a really lovely conclusion to the writings that we have here. So a great, great booklet that's included in this extraordinary release. Once again, Streetwise and Tiny: The Life of ERIN Blackwell. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.